Last May, after the pandemic hit, I flew to Germany to spend the summer with family and to have a place to live until college started up again. It was the day I arrived, May 25th, that George Floyd was killed by Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. Over the next 2 months I would spend in my mom's apartment in the small city of Bremen. Outrage and protest would flare up, first in Minneapolis and then across the country. As I saw online how the anger spread from Black Lives Matter organizers to hundreds of thousands of people in cities across the US, I felt a sense of duty to be back home joining the protests and supporting the movement. This, of course, was not an option. I had a flight booked at the end of July and was stuck in Germany until then. I never spent much time on Twitter before, but that started to change around this time. I wanted to engage as much as I could from a distance and found a lot of activism taking place on Twitter. Through the platform, I found protests in Germany that grew out of solidarity for those taking place in America, but this didn't feel like enough. I needed to stay informed about what was going on back home. Over the weeks and months, I started following activists and political commentators on Twitter, and was drawn into a microcosm on the internet of other people who were expressing similar feelings as I was. I felt like I had a portal into the movements taking place at home when I was unable to be there physically. The anger I felt towards the cops and the solidarity I felt with protesters was immediately justified every time I opened the app and refreshed my feed. Activists compiled videos of police violence and protesters being attacked into supercuts, and it felt like there were dozens of these videos on my timeline every time I looked. At the time, it felt like my responsibility to watch the footage of the violence being unleashed against protesters and to spread it as far as I could. If just a few more people saw what was happening, the movement might grow and become more powerful. I have since returned to California and have had a chance to take part in my own share of protests and political engagements. But the time I spend on Twitter and my involvement with online discussion has not waned. Being stuck inside for most of the day since months has led to an almost constant search for news and information to keep me feeling engaged with the outside world. As I write these words, a few days out from an election that may cement the disintegration of our country or return it to the previous status quo that got us here, I'm having a hard time piecing together what it is I want to say. What is the point? Where is this all leading other than some dystopian cataclysmic end? I go back on Twitter to try and find out. As I scroll down my feed, I couldn't help but wonder why these videos of police brutality against protesters and people of color in general seemed to be everywhere I looked. Was it because this was the harsh reality in so many protests and for so many people across the country? Of course. But did it also attract a lot of attention and generate activity on the platform? Without a doubt. Like almost all social media platforms, Twitter is interested in generating clicks, prioritizing the short comment over the lengthy idea, and above all else, showing people what they want to see. The difference is, no other platform has since its inception aimed to be a political forum in the way Twitter has. Twitter is not for posting pictures of your family or talking to your grandma in the way that Facebook markets itself to be. The platform is predominantly focused around users' self-alignment with one group or another. Emojis become signifiers for political affiliation, identity, and religion. Another key difference lies in the way Twitter users use the platform in comparison to other social media. A Pew Research study has shown that 80% of tweets come from just 10% of users. When placed in contrast with a platform like Instagram, for example, where most users tend to both consume and produce content, the unique nature of Twitter becomes apparent. Twitter, then, is a blend between a news source and social media. What originally attracted me to the platform was a desire for information straight from the source. I loved the fact that I could follow my favorite journalists for their reporting and get reports directly from the activists protesting on the front lines. But after months of accessing the platform, often multiple times a day, I am left with questions about where the line between being well-informed and being over-informed lies. As I scroll down my timeline, I see the fears of others over the upcoming election, which in turn amplifies my own anxieties. The onslaught of disturbing news and imagery worms its way into my mind, eventually losing its meaning altogether. What started out for me as a way to get more engaged with politics and social movements has had an inverse effect, making me feel entirely powerless under the vast sea of the world's problems on tap at all times of the day. The illusion that Twitter sells is that users are engaging with the world's problems and creating positive change. But is this Twitter's actual goal? Of course not. The only metrics by which Twitter gauges success is the amount of time users spend on the platform and how much users interact with it. As with so much social media, the limitations of our minds and the amount of information we can process in a day is our demise. The alluring offer of virtually limitless information Twitter has created only makes sense if we presuppose that more information equals more positive action. However, I doubt this is the case. From my personal experience, the information overload it is so easy to receive does not leave me more motivated to fight. A lot of the time, it makes me feel like giving up instead.